It appears to me that we have a quorum. I am assuming that it does appear to me that LD is also entertaining, also joining us as a call-in person, not as a full participant, but welcome all. Brenda, do you know if James Frias has been able to shake himself loose today?
I'm going to defer to Erin. I think she was talking to him yesterday about it.
I know he was sent an invite. I don't know whether he'll be able to join us today.
Okay, so let's sort of, by the way of housekeeping and opening notes, we do have our NDS director started on Monday, James Frias. I did invite him to join us today by sending an email to, I think, Erin and Sam, and to what I believed his new email would be. But if he's here, great. If not, we'll catch up with him soon. It is, after all, I guess his second full day on the job. So having said that, the agenda today is as I said, a little on the well, it's not necessarily light, but we're dealing with two ongoing matters and then general updates. Having declared a quorum, I think we're ready to go here. On the housekeeping side of things, Brenda and Erin have both noted this, as well as I have, that our subcommittee roster is now a bit of a mess. So I'm going to take it upon myself to clean that up a little bit and circulate that around and reaffirm who's serving on what subcommittees. Some of that is, of course, subject to folks' choice, but the general rule has been everyone picks two, and some folks are obvious candidates for certain subcommittees or not. But I'll get something circulated the next week or so to the group on that. We have our minutes from our last full meeting. If you all could take a gander at those, and then we can get underway.
Chair, I was referred to as Chris Myers rather than Meyer, but if someone can just fix that, that's the only thing I found.
Yeah, you're noted correctly in terms of attendance, but not in one reference. Noted.
It's just a representation of your plurality.
Thanks, Sunshine. Chair, I'll move to approve the minutes from our last meeting in August.
Cool, thank you.
I'll second.
Great, thank you. Any discussion of that? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Great, that was quick. I do note that we have at this point been joined by James Frias, so I thought we might engage in a quick round of introductions and welcome to him. So James, welcome, good to see you again. Welcome, Sam, there you go. Hi. This is the Housing Advisory Committee. I'm glad you were able to pop in and make it. I know that you are busy drinking from a fire hose at the moment, so I appreciate your carving out a little room for us. Since you are here, some of the folks here you may have met briefly, but it's probably worthwhile to take a run through us and say hi. I'll start with me. We have met, but I'm Phil D'Oronzio. I am the present chair of the HAC. My appointment is as the banker representative for City Council. So that's what that is me. Ridge, you want to start with you?
Sure. Welcome to Charlottesville. I am Ridge Schuyler, and I'm a dean at Piedmont Virginia Community College.
Great. Sunshine,
Sunshine Mathon at Piedmont Housing Alliance.
that I'm sure, and then perhaps Rory next.
Rory Stoltenberg, Planning Commissioner, working renewable energy technology. I'm standing in for Lyle Sully Yates today, who's actually on this commission.
Okay.
Thank you. Chris Meyer.
Yeah, welcome. Glad to have you in the position. I'm Executive Director of the Local Energy Alliance Program, a nonprofit here that does energy efficiency work in low-income housing and market rates. And so we have about a couple different programs that we implement on the city's behalf, but also on behalf of Dominion Utility and other utilities and foundations. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you.
Dan.
Dan Rosenzweig, Habitat for Humanity of Greater Charlottesville. Welcome, James. Really great to have you here.
Great. Thank you.
Jen Jacobs.
Hi, I'm Jen Jacobs. I'm with AHIP. We do critical repairs and rehabs for families in Charlottesville and also Elmore County. Nice
Cool.
to see you.
Gary. You're muted, sir. There you
Sorry,
go.
hey James, local real estate developer and small business owner here in Charlottesville.
Great.
Nancy.
Hello, I'm Nancy Kidd. I'm the director of the MACA Hope House Family Navigation Program, and welcome to Charlottesville.
Thank you.
Russell.
Good afternoon, everyone. Russell Ray with Region 10 CSB. I'm the Director of Housing Programming here at the agency. We administer around 400 or so housing voucher subsidies to our most vulnerable in Central Virginia.
Great. Stephen Stokes.
Hi, Steve Stokes, representing Jefferson Area Board for Aging.
Sure. Juan Diego Wade.
Juan Diego Wade, member of the City of Charlottesville School Board.
Sure. Let's see, Julia Monteith.
Hello, I'm Julia Monteith. I'm the Associate University Planner for the University of Virginia. Welcome, James, and you'll see that we just sent you an invite to join us with Sam for a tour of grounds in October. So we'll get to meet you in person at that point. But welcome
Great.
to our community.
Thank you.
Great. Michael Casano.
Michael Casano from the Johnson Village Neighborhood Association. Welcome to Charlottesville.
Anthony, where are you at? There you go.
Hey, I'm Anthony. I'm the director for Thomas Jefferson Area Coalition for the Homeless. I'm assuming we're just doing introductions.
That's what we're doing. Yes.
Good to see you,
You
buddy.
arrived just in time to snag the spotlight. Well
Perfect.
done. And then I think we've got several members of staff who you know here who can happily wave in. Brenda Kelly, Alex, you were here. There you are, Alex, Aaron and ATAC, and I assume John Sales, are you there as well, sir?
Yes, but I'm not city staff.
That's what I was going to, that's why I listed you last. And there's John Sales, who, please go ahead, sir.
I'm the executive director of the Housing Authority in Charlottesville.
So did I cover anybody? Did I miss anybody? Great. Well, anyway, as most of them said, we're very glad to have you here. We're taking up a couple of issues today, but happy to hear any introductory comments you may have to make. All the reins of hi, how are you?
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for the warm welcome from all of you. This is a much bigger committee than I was anticipating. So, but looks like a lot of great work collectively being done. my name is James Fries. Last name rhymes with Lease. So imagine that there's an E at the end. That's how it goes. And what am I on? Day 3. And lots of great work happening here. And I'm just eager to get involved in it. The comprehensive plan is frankly an impressive body of work so far. And looking forward to working with you guys, working with staff here and our team, Planning Commission and City Council to get this over the finish line. And I'm eager to hear from you guys and what you guys see as the issues that I should be aware of or thinking about. And I look forward to meeting as many of you as possible in person as soon as possible. Do you want, I don't know if you're looking for background, I can talk a little bit about where I'm coming from. Before moving to Charlottesville, I was up in Massachusetts. I've been in Massachusetts for 12 years, working for a couple different communities and the regional planning agency up there at different times. Worked on a lot of housing issues, as you might imagine, in the Boston area. And I've worked on a range of other issues as well. So I can bring a lot of different experience and ideas to the table. Before I was in Massachusetts, I worked for the city of Hampton, Virginia for about 5 years. And I'm originally from the DC area. Went to school here, so I'm not entirely unfamiliar with Charlottesville. I've been around town before, and my parents have been living here for about 15 years. So I've been, over the last 15 years, I've been here at least once or twice a year. And that's about it for background. If anyone has any more questions for me now, happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll listen in and pipe up if I got something to share.
Great, thank you, sir. So, on our agenda today are 2 issues that the policy subcommittee has taken up and is still working on. So we're sort of checking in and seeking input and giving some direction there. And then we're also, in general, we try to get an update from the other localities too. If there is any, just sort of take the pulse on who's doing what and where. I guess in terms of the city update, one of the, I guess our headline is we have hired an NDS director who is now on the job. Welcome. Do we have any update bullet points staff wise for the city?
Yeah, I think if is somebody trying to speak?
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
The floor is yours, Alex.
Oh, it's he's gonna give a I'm getting to I think Sam, I'm sorry, Sam's gonna give the update.
Okay.
Right.
Got it. All right. Hopefully Alex is okay. Yeah, we do have an update for you all. Just this week, I have announced internally changes that we will be allocating some resources to our work in the housing space specifically, but beyond that, in addressing a variety of issues that don't necessarily have a home. We are now giving them a technical home. We have had an office of housing under the city manager's office already formed, and at the moment had a housing coordinator position, is the only real staff person assigned to it. Brenda, being redevelopment manager, has been in that space as well, but it hasn't been a fully coordinated function. So the effort that I'm undertaking at this time, and has now been communicated to all staff and has the council's acknowledgement of the plan forward, is that we have retitled that office. It's now going to be called the Office of Community Solutions. It will reside in City Space. This space will be focused on our housing priorities, community redevelopment interests, our federal entitlements and investments coordination, and neighborhood constituent services. So Alex is going to be serving as the interim director of this function for me to be able to work with putting more teeth to what that means, how that works, where we go. And then Brenda and Aaron will be joining him in that space as the team that'll be working on this work for now. It's what they've been doing, but it's also to kind of define in a better way what each of them is up to, and then look for how do we go beyond that. I have a variety of thoughts of where else we can go, but one of the key priorities that I've begun to communicate to council and staff is that we need to build our capacity to be able to address the affordable housing crisis that exists in our city. And so far, we are not equipped internally to manage it effectively. So this is putting us on the right course for that. And we will be able to take our time and figure out over the next few budget cycles what I'll be asking for in the way of additional support so that we can add additional positions. As I rolled it out to the team, I have commented on this being viewed at some point as the equivalent of a department so that we are robust enough to manage internally everything that we are doing externally. So that's the announcement. I'm excited about it. I hope you all can find a way to join me in that space and see that we're trying to go in a different direction and get more going. It's a lot to stay tuned for. But right now it's all about just trying to get ourselves organized and figure out what we can do in the way of getting better at what we do.
Great. Thank you, sir. Any questions on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And Sam, I appreciate that overview of the changes that are being made, and they do sound like, I think, the right direction when you need to go. With the housing coordinator position that has been opened, and this is my monthly ask, so I assume that still position is not going away, it's just getting, again, moved under this new orientation of the staff, and is there any progress in hiring that housing coordinator?
Yeah, so we're not going to fill the position for now because we're having to manage what we're doing with pulling individuals into this one space. But the goal will be to figure out how soon we will go there and do that. In the meantime, we're still going to be doing the work of the housing coordinator. So that's what we're going to organize ourselves around as a priority.
Could I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely, sir.
So Sam, intriguing the idea that the sort of public nature of that space and the title Office of Community Solutions. Do you see one of the functions of this department or of this place, space, department, whatever you want to call it, as being a housing hub, sort of a one-stop shop for people who need housing solutions? Because there have been efforts on the part of others to coordinate it, but I think I could speak for most people that we'd really be happy to not do it and have the city be the sort of the honest broker.
I'm not necessarily saying that we want to take over hub function. I just want to make sure that the city has its hub in a place that everyone else knows where to plug in to get whatever access points that they need. We're looking at creating a collaborative space that will allow us to work across departments, which is not something that we have been able to really do a great job at, just being honest. The goal will be, with additional changes that are coming, with moving some folks around, added space will be available to this team that will be available to help us do even more creative things in bringing groups and parties together to work with us and help inform whatever actions that we're taking. I'm not prepared to say that we're ready to be the hub for the city, but I'm interested in hearing more about what has been attempted in the past. And if it's a matter of space being a central location, then I think we are open to considering what we might be able to do to support that.
Great, thanks. It's possible we can bring the conversation offline, so maybe Sunshine or I can kind of fill you in on the work that's gone on so far. Hits and misses, a lot of misses, but a clear and present need in the community that we've heard time and again from community members, that there's kind of confusion in the marketplace. People don't know where to turn to begin to navigate housing solutions. And there have been some good efforts. In the homeless services world, the efforts have been, there's been a coordinated entry program. There hasn't been one across the entire housing space. And so I think I can speak for others. We'd like to help if we can there, or interface with it if it ends up somewhere else.
Great.
This is Sunshine. Oh, sorry, this is Sunshine. Just to say that, Dan, there's actually some new information you don't have yet around the integration of that idea into the FOC in particular. So I can follow up afterwards with you, Sam, and Dan, and others who are interested.
Great. Thanks, Sunshine.
I think I'll just say that the response is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for us to figure it out. Let's just figure out what things we need to further discuss. And if we can come up with an idea that is not currently in my head, because everything is in my head right now, being perfectly honest with where we are. I described to this new team that I'm on a hamster wheel and I'm running by myself, and I'm just making room for them to join me. So we'll figure it out.
Thank you, sir. Brenda, I actually had an exchange with Dr. Pathia this morning, but didn't think to ask her. Do we have a county update?
Sorry, Chair, you would oblige her. I just have one more question or observation. Not necessarily to what Sam said. I don't know if other people, it sounds like they're done, but regarding a city update, if that's okay.
Sure.
Everybody, I participated in the Planning Commission meeting yesterday on the hearing that reviewed the 240 Stribling application, which was going to be 170 units. I'll just say I was very disappointed in the lack of apparent coordination between the various city departments. I think, Sam, hopefully what you're talking about, kind of reorging it, but we basically saw different departments working against each other in this meeting and bringing up different numbers and questions about if the CIP numbers in the budget are legit or not. You know, it was a mess, just to put it bluntly. And I think Councilor Payne, you saw that. Commissioner Stolzenberg, you were there and aware of it. But if we're going to get housing done, and again, I'm an advisory committee, I'm providing you some advice, but what we saw last night can't continue to happen regarding the lack of coordination between different city departments and just disregard for, I guess, each other's efforts. So I'll just say that, but I wanted that in the public comment and to know that, at least from a citizen's perspective, but also as a leader, again, advising all you guys, that cannot happen again. Okay, thank you.
And if I could, just one last comment on speaking to that, and I'm sure James probably has a comment of his own, but I want you to appreciate the name change and the choice to use solutions at the end of it instead of a community development office, which would have been the traditional thing to do. That's exactly the point. That I agree with you that what we witnessed last night should have gone very differently. And part of what we are already working on is ensuring that we don't repeat that over and over and over. Collaboration is the key. And if we can provide the space and make sure everyone's on the same page, that should be the result.
Yeah, I can really only just reiterate what Sam said. That was my expectation is that we will be, the collaboration is how I approach these things. And Sam and I have had conversations about kind of piecing together what happened over the last couple of days that led to last night, and we are working on it. So that's as much as I can say right now, but yeah.
Appreciate the recognition that it was not ideal and that Mr. Sam, I also solutions, I hope that's what the focus is on. And I would say half the city departments were focused on that and the other half didn't seem focused on that. Anyways, not to belabor that point, but thank you, Chair, for letting me dive into that.
No, not at all. As you pointed out, advisory committee, it's advice. So I understand we don't have a substantive update from the county. beyond the prior report from last month, Julia, do you have anything to add to that as far as UVA is concerned?
No, I don't think there are any updates on our part. Thank you.
Thanks.
I mean, one thing I'd add for the county is that they have a pretty major public hearing going on tonight for the RST proposal for essentially it's a LIHTC, it's a private LIHTC developer. It'll be 75% affordable apartments. I think it's 332 units total. And I think about 75 of those are market rate stacked townhomes and a couple regular townhomes at the end now. And then all the apartment buildings, 75% of those apartments would be affordable at an average 60% AMI. So the Board of Supervisors will be hearing that tonight.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. All right. So policy subcommittee had been tasked with a couple of items. One was to follow up. There are sort of two things of brewing here. One was to follow up on the tax abatement reauthorization and the ordinance that was presented us by the treasurer. We were looking to sort of sharpen that up and put an affordable housing lens on it. And the subcommittee met for that, and Ridge will speak to that. And then secondly, we have been tasked by Sam Sanders to present sort of a 30,000 foot priority list, roughly broken out by fiscal year for the affordable housing plan. This is a prelude to sort of getting a working group running for the nuts and bolts, but just sort of an order of battle. And we had a meeting to start that process with the subcommittee, and Dan led that discussion. And we're going to sort of look for some general input and meet again on that. But I'll speak more to those issues. Ridge, are you prepared to sort of give this presentation on this abatement program at this point?
I am. So I'll
do that.
I'll take it away. So, and just to reorient everybody to this, so this was a topic of discussion that we had, and I don't, time is a blur to me these days. It may have been back in May, but this is an item that was brought to us by the city treasurer, Jason Vandiver, and the city assessor, Jeff Davis, about this statute that allows us to do partial exemptions for the rehabilitation or replacement of older residential units in the city. And so we took some guidance from the HAC at that first meeting. We then had a policy subcommittee follow-up in August to put together some ideas that we are now going to float past the full HAC again. The purpose of this discussion today is for you all to provide additional input into what we've come up with so far, as Phil said, to put a affordable housing lens on the tax abatement program. So I'm going to run through that and show you a couple of slides that indicate where we are with it. And please, I welcome your input. There are specific questions that I have at the end of the presentation, and then a couple of bracketed items as I go through that would that we want to address as we go. So let's jump right in. So nothing like having a bunch of slides to really gin up your lunch hour. So 58.133220 of the Virginia Code, just to remind you all what this ordinance does, or what this statute does. The governing body of any city may provide for the partial exemption from taxation of real estate on which any structure 15 years or older has undergone substantial rehabilitation, renovation, or replacement. And unlike many statutes that are passed by the General Assembly, this one gives a fair amount of latitude to the localities to shape this as they want to meet the city's, in this case, the city's objectives. So at the full HAC meeting and subsequently we talked about this affordable housing lens. The amount of the tax exemption is an amount equal to the increase in assessed value following the substantial improvement, or an amount equal to the percentage of the increase in assessed value, or an amount up to 50% of the cost of the rehabilitation, renovation, or replacement. So those are the parameters that we are permitted to work within. They gave some permissive examples in the ordinance of what an ordinance could have. They could establish criteria for determining what real estate qualifies. It may require that buildings be older than 15 years. It may establish square footage requirements for replacement structures, and it may apply to multifamily residential units that have been replaced for multifamily use. Those are just examples. We're not limited to those, but just those, kind of got our wheels turning. So following the full hack and subsequent policy subcommittee meetings, what we've focused on, the goal of the program would be to create incentives for affordable rentals and wealth creation for low-income homeowners. So that would be the goal of the partial exemption ordinance. Following up on that, focusing in on who and what qualifies for the partial exemption from real estate taxes. So we settled on, as a working draft, the property must be 15 years old or older. The renovation, rehabilitation, or replacement must increase the value of the improvements by at least 15%. So there's got to be some increase in value. Those improvements could include additions to an existing residential structure. They could include accessory dwelling units built on the property, and it could include multifamily property as well. Finally, and this one is going to require a little bit of discussion, the exemption can last for, our placeholder was 15 years, which is the maximum amount allowed in the statute. The current ordinance says the exemption can last for 7 years. And so one place for us to pause right now and just get some feedback from the group is, how long do we think the exemption should last? Should a homeowner who engages in the substantial rehabilitation or replacement of improvements on their property, who qualify as either low-income homeowners or renting to low-income tenants, how long should that partial tax exemption last? And I open it up for just general discussion. You don't have to give me a precise number, but just some feedback about whether we should go to the maximum amount of 15 years or do something less than that. Thoughts from the group, if any.
Is there provision in the statute to tie the length of the exemption within that 15-year envelope to that qualifying property doing what we want it to do? In other words, for up to 15 years, as long as it's rented affordably, for up to 15 years, as long as it's occupied by the original owner. Is that?
Yes, so we can put parameters around it that, and as you'll see further down in our recommendations, if you're renting to low-income tenants, you've got to affirm that every year. So yes, it isn't, once you get the exemption, you don't then automatically get to keep it for the entire time if that's not what the community wants to do.
But 15 is the maximum allowable per state code. Is that
correct?
Right?
That is correct.
Well, then I'm good.
I'm fine with keeping it at that amount of years, knowing that we can tweak it if we need to, based on the performance of the owner.
Before I respond, can you remind me, Ridge, what the magnitude on an annual basis of potential amount of dollars we're talking about is?
Yeah, so all I can give you is what the current tax exemption costs, which is very different than what we're doing now, but it's on the order between $150,000 and $200,000 a year in foregone revenue to the city.
Sorry, what I meant was, sorry, magnitude to that individual homeowner or.
Oh, so I don't have that. It obviously depends on the value of the improvements or the increase in the assessed value. And I think we could work with Jason to pencil out some examples. I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah, so I guess not entirely by coincidence, I have done some business with more than one recipient of this program. So in figuring out what I'm doing with their escrow account falls into that. So and how to explain how to track that. In terms of a practical monthly amount, if it's pretty significant. It's a 3-figure monthly difference in some cases. You know, the net effect is, yeah, it can be more than $100 a month or more in housing cost saved. So it's not, but of course it depends. And I believe that we can probably tease out some more of that numbers based on the data that the Treasurer's Office gave us. But that would require farting about with the Excel spreadsheet for a few minutes. So, but we can get data on that, I think, rough numbers.
Yes.
For some context, at current tax rates, $100 a month is equivalent to $126,000 in assessed value increment.
Yeah. And that's not, I mean, if you're doing a substantial rehab of an older house, that's not an unreasonable number. The two that I'm thinking of, it was, you know, well over $100 a month in savings.
Thanks for that. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but the only reason I asked primarily is to see whether or not there was value in considering it being at a tiered level. So if you are doing, I don't know, I don't remember what the thresholds are to qualify as affordable. I assume it's 80% AMI. But if that's not the case, could you do, you know, 7 years if you're doing below 80% AMI, but 15 years if you're below 60% AMI or something along those lines? I don't want to make it overly complicated, but just a thought.
So based on the permissive nature of the statute, I think we can certainly create a tiered system, and then we just need to, you know, decide what those tiers should be, and then make our recommendations to City Council accordingly. And I think what Rory just did off the top of his head with a little bit of assistance from technology, we could, you know, easily create a table that says if you did a $50,000 improvement, you would save this amount in your, you know, if we have the exemption at this rate. So we can definitely create a table that would give people an idea of what that benefit would look like. I'll have to retreat to my standard excuse, which is I'm a history major and math is not my strongest suit. So without the help of Rory and Excel, it's difficult for me to do it off the top of my head.
So let me sort of ask this as a procedural question or an administrative question. We can presumably put pretty permissive language in this ordinance that says that directs rulemaking on that particular point, right? I mean, we don't have to exculpate everything down to the nth degree there necessarily. Yeah,
true.
So could direct city staff to tier it like this and come up with a plan based on our needs to be reevaluated every X amount of time. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
So
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
So to be clear, we're talking about a wholesale replacement of the existing ordinance, right? And so in this new one, it would be contingent only for dwellings incorporating affordable units?
So I'll get to the who and what qualifies here in just one second, but yes, I've actually redlined the existing ordinance, but we're very much changing the direction of how the ordinance operates today. And what we saw and what Jason and Jeff brought to our attention is there is this tool in the toolbox. It wasn't necessarily designed to increase affordable housing. It was probably designed to rehab older homes in a kind of a block by block process, the way AHIP has done, you know, in the city. But because the language in the statute is so broad, we saw it as a potential tool that we could put in the toolbox to increase affordable rentals and the wealth creation for low-income homeowners. And I can go next to those slides about who would qualify under this ordinance. But is taking it in a very different direction than it is been used in the past.
And were you able to get data from them on how it has been used in the past? I mean, certainly my impression of this is that it's been very much a tool for essentially flippers. But it's not really based on data.
Yep. So Jason Vandiver provided us an excellent spreadsheet. I did not think to present it today, but we do have the data, every year about where this the existing ordinance has been used. If we want to dive back into that, and after this meeting, my intention would be to take your suggestions, refine the draft that came out of the policy subcommittee, and I can circulate Jason's spreadsheet along with that for you all to stew on, with the hope that maybe at the next HAC meeting we could actually vote on recommendations to forward to City Council.
So depending on the timing of that, since we're going to be having a policy subcommittee and we're empowered to move forward, if we've got some consensus, it may make as much sense, depending on if not by the next HAC meeting or one of these policy subcommittee, to sort of polish the final draft in one of those and move it along, but with the encouragement of input from everywhere. And I'm just saying that just to move the calendar along.
Yep, no, I hear you.
Yeah, we want as much consensus as we can get, but we don't want to get paralyzed by waiting another month either necessarily. But I mean, that's all subject to. But anyway, yes, sir.
Yes, Sunshine.
Sorry. The other thing I just want to make sure that we catch in the nuance, which I'm not sure how the language allows for this or not, but just thinking about the community land trust model, I would want to be sure that if, let's say, the community land trust acquires a home, does renovations on it, sells it to a low-income qualifying home buyer, that home buyer can still benefit from the tax reduction. So we don't need to answer that now, Reg, and if we need to noodle in the legalese of that, we can, but I just want to make sure I put that on the table.
Yeah, so as currently drafted, that purchaser would not qualify. But that's just how we drafted it. We can look harder about whether or not that could be changed.
Yeah, I would advocate for that strongly.
Okay. Duly noted.
As would I.
Okay. I'm going to keep on trucking. Let's see. And if somebody else could keep track of the chats, it's a little bit hard for me because all I can see are my slides. So just pipe up if there's something in the chat that I need to address as we go. And just to let you all know, I do not have 44 slides, so don't worry. All right. So what qualifies? So the policy subcommittee suggested, as we've already hinted at, that there be a landlord exemption that's designed to help encourage wealth creation for low-income homeowners. And these are the parameters of the landlord exemption. I'm sorry, this is the landlord exemption. This is creating affordable rentals. You must rent the improved property to households making X% less or X% or less of the area median income. That X could be tiered. So it could be 80% and you have a shorter exemption period or a more limited exemption. 80% was the placeholder that I put in the draft I circulated, but there was no magic in that. It was just something to put in the box. And then the next is that the rent can be no more than 30% of household income, including utilities. And that's in brackets because that is a constantly shifting number that may be difficult to track. But I did just pull the definition of affordable housing from elsewhere in the Virginia Code so that we would be tracking, where else that appears in the code. And I believe those are the only two requirements. Oh, the tenant household income and rent amount must be verified each year. And that goes back to this question that Dan asked at the top of the hour about, and that S. Lisa Herndon raised when we had our policy subcommittee, is making sure that there's accountability and that it's actually achieving its goal. And so the tenant household income would be, and rent amount would have to be verified each year. So I will pause there and open up the floor to further discussion about what percentage of AMI the tenant would have to have in order for the landlord to get this exemption. And secondly, to open up the discussion about whether including utilities should be part of the verification that you are renting and charging a rent that is affordable when the landlord goes to verify that they are qualified for this exemption. So I open it up for comments on those two parts of this.
I have a question, Ridge.
Yeah.
Is the purpose of this program to give incentive to the investors locally? Because to me, the numbers that haven't put out my calculator yet, but the savings on the tax abatement of about few $100 a month really doesn't probably incentivize most investors to tackle this program, given the market rents would be substantially higher than what an affordable housing rent would be. So the investor's still losing money. At least that's quick numbers. But again, if the point is to incentivize investors and developers, that's just my 2 cents on that.
So this is just a tool in the toolbox that is trying to acknowledge and provide some relief if a landlord does provide affordable rentals following a major improvement. It is likely not going to be the decision about whether you charge market rates or not. One of the greatest beneficiaries of this program it could perhaps be a landlord who wants to do affordable rentals and is trying to make the numbers work, and every bit of savings they can get from property tax abatement or other sources of incentive could help them do that.
Well, of course.
Or it could be also, a homeowner who is upgrading their home and want to keep the home affordable. And this is an alternative option versus outright selling the home.
Yeah, and of course,
I would wait. So go ahead.
just to sort of jump in on one piece of that is that that's the rent, of course, is rent charged directly to the tenant. I mean, we were talking about the siloing we talk about the siloing of programs and policy here a lot. And one thing is, well, in combination with, housing vouchers, this is an opportunity to get a cheaper cost of carry and be able to receive market rents.
So I'm going to hate myself for saying this because this is opposite of what I usually say. But I agree with not the part that I agree with Gary that's opposite of what I usually say, but I actually, in this case, $100 is not a substantial amount. It's not going to, as I agree then with Ridge, it's not going to incentivize someone to do this, but it might help somebody or encourage somebody who's already renting affordably to upgrade their unit. So having said that, I would think that typically I want to push the incentives down as much as possible so that most all city policies are encouraging people to build or rent at 30% or below, or 50% or below. In this case, given only the marginal savings, I hate myself for saying this because I'm usually not an 80% guy, but I think we probably want to put in the ordinance 80% of area median income so that it can be combined with other tools. And then the other thing in terms of staff and the ability to track this and monitor it, make it as simple as possible. So when you're now throwing in utilities, if staff has to now track utilities, again, usually most policies I'm in favor of the satisfaction of the affordable housing requirement being by the AMI of the recipient. But this may be one of those things where it's price. You can't rent for you can only rent a certain bedroom unit at a certain price and see what happens. Now I duck as everybody throws things at the screen. But again, this is for a more robust program. So housing fund money, et cetera, I think it ought to be based on the AMI of the recipient. And it can be things like the reporting requirements, including utilities, make sense. But in this case, because it's the savings is only marginal, I think we want this thing to get used. And so I would keep it simple.
Yeah, just to agree with Dan on the utilities piece, landlords chasing tenants for average utility bills and then providing that information, that just sounds to me like sending this program as a ticket to the boneyard. I mean, I can get.
So there is a proxy though, which is, and this is somewhat commonly used, which is instead of having to go through the process of verifying utility bills, instead of it being 30% of your income, it's 25% of your income. And that just gives a little bit of room for utility costs to be accounted for. So that's one response to that. The other thing I'll just throw out there is data points, just so we're thinking here. An 80% AMI household, family of 3, and I'm going to use 30% for a moment. At 30% of your income, theoretically can manage about $1,650 in rent. A 60% household can manage about $1,250 in rent, roughly speaking, just to give a sense of scale.
So I have one more question. Is the landlord going to be responsible for tracking these metrics? I assume that they will be, like the 30% of household income every year, I guess annually, the landlord, because landlords, especially with property managers, most of the local property managers here in Charlottesville, I mean, they collect rent and they handle maintenance calls, but if you're asking them to track these other metrics, that could be very tricky and almost be a burden to the program. And then your mom and pop landlords, again, they're mainly collecting the rent and handling maintenance repairs. I think having to track these annually and get this information accurately from the tenants sounds easy enough, but believe it or not, it could potentially be another burden on the program.
I have a question. Am I
I see a
understanding
bunch
this
of
right?
hands raised. Who's speaking? Go ahead.
It's Mike Asana. So this arbitrary $100 of savings per month, would that be under the assumption that there's a $129,000 increase in value from said renovation?
Yes.
Got it. Thanks.
I didn't see whose hand went up first, so I'm just going to go on as I see him on the screen. Chris, go first.
Yeah, thanks. I'd agree on 80% AMI. That's a lot of the program cutoffs we use for our income age qualifying, whether utility programs or other programs with the city. So it seems to, again, like Dan said, we'd be able to braid, as we say, and combine a lot of programs potentially to help folks. I will, as I think I said this the last time, I will highly suggest we don't have a rent limit cap on it. Basically, again, and I think Gary mentioned some of these things, just not only tracking that. I would say we try to track utility data, and this is what we do, and it's very hard to try to get people to get bills out of Dominion or Charlottesville Gas is not that bad, but definitely not utilities. And I don't think you're going to have many landlords participate in something where you're going to have to figure out and calculate income and then, again, have it capped. It's just, to me, if someone wants to pay more than 30% too, they should be allowed to pay more than 30% and get, if they don't feel like the apartment's got value or the house has got value, they should be allowed to do that. Finally, sorry. Yeah, I would get away with the verifying the income every year. If the tenant was able to make more money and then we would take it away, obviously they're not gonna kick the tenant out, and then the landlord shouldn't be also, I think, how do you want to say it? Penalized for their tenant making more money, right? So I would get rid of that qualification too. Thanks.
All right, Rory, I see you next.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of the things you guys are talking about are generally like the set of policy problems that we need to approach with this whole suite of kind of rent regulated affordable housing as called for in the affordable housing plan. I note that on pages 94 through 96 of the affordable housing plan, the inclusionary zoning segment, it specifically does talk about tax abatements as a way of helping to make the inclusionary units pencil. So to the extent that these units are going to be required as part of, I mean, at this point, it's still very unclear if we're going to do a sort of overlay where you get bonus units with inclusionary zoning, and ideally in a way that actually pencils and someone will actually do. But if they're going to be required, then those things are going to have it anyway, right? Tracking and rent limits and whatever, or the program will have to be designed to not have those. And then an abatement is kind of part of that tool set to make it work. So, I mean, I think these are really broad policy problems that we need to be tackling like everywhere. And we need to be doing it in the same way for all of the different programs, or there's just going to be a maze of different things where you're layering these things, these different programs, and every one of them has totally different requirements. We need to set a specific set of requirements that we apply basically universally. I mean, obviously you can, turn dials if they're, on numerical things, but we shouldn't be having drastically different paperwork burdens for different things. And that's going to position city offices who are in charge of tracking this stuff to be able to do it consistently. Because right now, city offices are not set up to be tracking these things, even proffered units at all. And every single one is different. And it's a huge burden on, I know it's a burden on staff. I'm assuming it's a burden on developers, or they're trying to skirt their way out of it. And I think we really need to be approaching it all as kind of one combined thing here. The other thing I'd add is when we're talking about the overlay and making it pencil, we were talking about different requirements for the sensitive communities versus the really expensive places where it's hard to make anything pencil, right? And so it might make sense to tweak those AMI limits depending on where in the city you are.
So
Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just sort of piggyback a quick comment on that, and then which is that what you're speaking to there is also the implementation of the affordable housing plan, which is the other big project we're undertaking here on how to sort of plan that and get it organized. And not to argue with your example, but the sensitive communities, there's also an owner occupancy piece of this that I think is coming up in the presentation. And to play dictatorial timekeeper, I'll note that it's a minute or two after 1 o'clock there, Rich, just to let you know.
Yeah, and so and Phil, what time should we plan to wrap this up?
Well, we want to at least spend a few minutes on part 2. Dan jumped off, so I'll sort of handle that. That shouldn't take too terribly long, but you know, I don't know if we want to,
So are we talking about 10 more minutes?
Yeah, 10 or 15, I think.
Okay, all right.
I think Sunshine was still.
Yep, Sunshine, then Chris had a follow-up, I think, and then we'll move on to the owner occupied, and you all will have chances to weigh in when I circulate a draft. And I do note that we're making recommendations to city council, and our recommendations don't have to be a track changes version of the ordinance with all of its specifics. It could be something that's broader that says, here's a tax abatement. Let's use the statute to do a tax abatement that encourages wealth creation for owner occupants and affordable rentals, and whatever rules apply with other tools in the toolbox should apply to this. So we could do it that way. Sunshine, and then Chris again.
I think Chris actually just had his hand up from the previous comment. So
okay.
A couple of just quick responses. One, I agree with simplicity and aligning programs in general. 2, there is plenty, to Gary's point around the burden of doing the income verification on homeowners. Frankly, no homeowner is, and frankly, most property managers are not positioned to know how to do that. So there is plenty of precedent for efforts like this in other cities where either the city does it, but if the city doesn't have the staff, which we clearly know is true here, at least not yet, to contract out with a nonprofit like ourselves or like New Hill or like somebody who does this on a regular basis for their projects, and they just become sort of the proxy entity to go through the verification. So just that, there's that. And then the last piece I'll share, just to agree with Chris on one point in particular, which is we don't want this to be an artificial cap on people increasing their income and wealth. So if it's being rented to a renter and they initially qualify and they don't move, then I think it should stay in place. Because that person has increased their income and that should just, that's outside the control of the homeowner. If somebody moves in that period of time and they have to re-rent, then that new person would have to be income qualifying. And then on the homeowner side, also, if they income qualify at the beginning when they are doing the work, then they should qualify regardless of what their income is in the future. They should qualify from that point forward for the term.
Well, that's a good segue into the owner occupied exemption. There are just a couple of points here that I wanted to ask. So the owner occupied exemption, as it came out of the policy subcommittee, would be a household income that must be, again, X% or less of the area median income. So it's low income, owner occupied. Must have owned the property for at least 2 years prior to applying for the exemption. And I know there's gonna be a little bit of discussion about that. Oops, and that was it. So if you are doing a substantial improvement to your home and you're low income, the idea is that we want to allow you to continue to build wealth. And one of the ways to do that is to reduce your property tax burden. The idea of having owned the property prior to applying, Phil, if you don't mind, I'll have you speak to that because I believe that was your suggestion.
So this, yeah, let me sort of crank the Wayback Machine because we'd like you, the calendar is something of a blur here. But so I think that discussion rose out of the idea to sort of push against the flipping. One. Number two is that we would be looking at folks who were dealing with deferred maintenance issues anyway. This is a preservation tool based on folks who already are in, particularly with what we're calling these sensitive areas, that this is an established homeowner who is, making these improvements to stay there. And I think we also had a brief conversation about the usual, carve outs for inheriting the property, but still there would have to be the intention to occupy. But that was sort of our general, it was an anti-gentrification attempt. That's what it was.
I guess I'm noodling on this idea, and I get the intention, but I'm thinking about a situation where, and as Piedmont Housing Alliance, when we're trying to deploy down payment assistance, we've confronted this issue many times, which is a home that somebody can afford, that can income qualify in the city, that we can bring down payment assistance to bear, but has major repair issues. And frankly, that's essentially all we're seeing these days at the price points that we can deploy down payment assistance for. Why wouldn't we allow somebody who wants to be a homeowner, who knows they have to do repairs in their property, who is going to income qualify, why would we prevent them from benefiting from this? Because otherwise, that's actually also a tool for anti-gentrification, because that person is somebody by definition who income qualifies and is not looking to flip it, is looking to become a homeowner.
That gets us, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative is that home sells to somebody who does flip it. And the person who's trying to buy it at an affordable level, and if they don't have some other mechanism for helping to finance the renovations, it's challenging.
So once they buy that home, are they holding on to it for at least a minimum of 2 years to ensure that we're not coming up against a loophole for flippers?
Yeah, can we do it forward looking and say, if you haven't been there for 2 years, you have to stay there for 2 years or you pay it back? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So as presented now, you have to continue to occupy it. You only get it for as long as you occupy it. But to Rory's earlier point about having consistency and also turning dials, this may be something where if you're going to not be someone who has been living there and says, oh, I can fix up my house now, but is in part of a purchase, that the requirements for the purchaser perhaps have a lower than 80 or perhaps has to be in conjunction with a DPA program or something else that shows that you're definitely pointed in that direction, to sort of work around that, to sort of address sunshine, the specifics of sunshine circumstances. One of the things we get with a lot of those is, of course, your FHA outlet is going to kick up a fuss on these homes too, on day one. So
there are wraparounds that you can do for home improvement. You have to apply for them early, but there are wraparounds that you can utilize. And I don't want us only to think about the nonprofits coming in and helping these homeowners, but anyone who can benefit from these programs.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So I see Chris has his hand raised, and I heard somebody else pipe up.
Oh,
was that
I didn't
was that
raise my
Joy?
hand. Let me raise
That's
my
all right. Well, let's go with Joy first, Chris, and give her a chance to speak, and then we'll go to you next. Joy?
So I have a question for you about the area median income. Some students and I were looking at it yesterday, and it seemed like the area median income is, or even for very low, is extremely high. So if it's as high as I looked at it yesterday, would this be helping, whatever we do, would it be helping people who truly really needs that?
Yeah, and I think, Joy, that's exactly why, this discussion, and we're not going to be able to conclude it today, and about what percentage of AMI do you need to earn in order to qualify? Is it 30% of AMI? Is it 80% of AMI? I think that's particularly—
I'm sorry, I didn't. We're looking at it with the student yesterday. It was like, it was very low, was, like 19,000 a year.
So that was like 30% AMI?
Something like that.
Yep.
But even low and extremely low and very, very low and extremely low, those numbers were just high. And I just want to make absolutely, I think Henson talked about, Herndon talked about it in another session about, the things that we are creating. It is really helping the people that it is designed to help. And I'm just wondering, do we really need to look at the area median income?
Yeah.
That's just something that was bothersome when I looked at it yesterday.
Yep.
There's a lot of people who probably will still not qualify for the help because of how high the area median income is. I just put that out there.
Yeah, so you can make less than whatever the percentage is here. You just can't make more than that in order to qualify. So the very low income homeowner would qualify. I think the question is, do we want wealthier homeowners to qualify as well? And that's where you kind of have to draw that line and say, this is really designed and targeted to a certain group of owner occupants who really need the help on tax abatements, whatever other tools we can provide for them. So I'll circulate a chart with an AMI table along with the follow-up to this, just so that people can see, because obviously 30% AMI doesn't really mean anything unless you see, oh, that's a family of 3 with an income of X. So I'll circulate that as well. And I'm about out of time. Chris, I saw that you had your hand raised.
Yeah, just I'll just say, I thought, again, regarding this, I don't think we need to worry about flipping, because if I understand the thing, the existing registration is if someone sells the property, the thing ends, right? So
correct.
I would get rid of the 2-year, again, homeownership requirement. And for some of what Sunshine was saying is, we have kind of a fluid population also between here and the county. If someone's trying to move back in from the county but was originally a resident, we want to basically, I think, help out again, the lower income folks in our, well, especially in our town, obviously, but get into these houses in the first place, and requiring that they live in their years, I think is an undue hardship for them to be able to benefit from the program. Thanks.
So thank you, Chris. There were a couple of questions that I had that we don't have time for, but I want to just raise them with you all, and then we'll address them. I'll circulate a draft, but the amount of the exemption, the greater of increased assessed value, or the 50% of the cost of the renovation, rehabilitation, and construction. That wasn't a question. That was just how the policy subcommittee said it should be, as rich an incentive as it can be if it's targeted to low-income homeowners and low-income renters. And then there were a number of questions that we don't have time to address here, but questions that did arise were, if you build an accessory dwelling unit, would the owner of the property have to meet both the owner occupied criteria and the rental criteria if that accessory dwelling unit is being rented to a low-income tenant? So do they have to meet both qualifications in order to get the partial tax exemption? And just something to think about. A couple other questions: would all units in an improved multifamily structure need to meet the rental criteria, or just a percentage? And if just a percentage, what's that percentage? This is what you all have raised before. Should a landlord continue to receive the exemption if a formerly low-income tenant exceeds the income threshold, but the rent is still limited to 30% of their household income? What I've heard is that we don't want to impede people's income gains. If they were low income when they qualified, as long as they stay in the unit, that partial exemption would continue. Should an owner continue to receive an exemption if their income exceeds the income threshold after qualifying? And I think I heard the same thing, which is that once you qualify, you qualify. And with the rentals, it's a yearly update. But if that renter no longer qualifies, but they did when they got there, then it would be essentially grandfathered. There was the question of the application fee. There was talk in the policy subcommittee of getting rid of that application fee because there is money set aside in the affordable housing plan to cover these kind of administrative costs. I think there was a concern on the part of the assessor's office that they have to do 2 assessments, both the before and the after, and send out assessment teams twice, and that costs. And so just trying to figure out what is the right answer there. And then, as always, as Lisa Herndon brings to our attention, what are the unintended consequences of proceeding down this route? And let's make sure as we formulate our final recommendations to City Council that we've done our best to anticipate unintended consequences. So that is what I've got. I have enough that I think I can circulate some ideas for recommendations following this meeting, and then Phil will just determine what the next step is, whether we have enough guidance for the policy subcommittee to make its own determination of what to recommend to City Council, or whether we need to come back again to the whole group or circulate to the whole group for comment. And I'll leave it up to you to help guide us on that. So thank you all for your input, and I appreciate it. And as always, a robust discussion.
Thank you very much, Rich. Appreciate it.
Hey, Rich,
so-
can you call me when you
What do you want me to call you?
call me on my phone?
I will.
So I'm just sort of thinking aloud in terms of timetable. So Ridge, I guess by what, the end of the weekend, you'll be able to get something spread out, or a little more time than that? Okay.
No, that's good.
So at that time, when that gets distributed out, if everyone could sort of, I mean, I know finding bandwidth is bananas these days, but take a look at that and shoot to Ridge comments, critique, criticisms, compliments, and expansions for him to sort of mess with as quickly as he can, so that if we meet 2 weeks from now to sort of make sense of it, we've got what we've got. So, and I'll follow up with an email to the group on that. Any sort of final thoughts on this piece before moving on?
I mean, again, I feel like a lot of those questions that were just listed are things that apply to other programs. Things like right now, the policy for proffered units or for required affordable units under 3412 says there's a 3-year grace period if your income goes up. For rentals, for ownership, it's only when you buy. Like, these are all things that we need to stop like making different ones. We just need to align all of the things together.
Or allow a previous overlay to be priority. We need to come up with that because we're not going to always sync together because we are not always in those meetings. So sometimes there needs to be an overlay priority. Maybe we can go from that perspective.
Right, a ranking of them, and this trumps that. This trumps. Sorry for the foul language, but and sort of general principles. I think it's a larger implementation issue, and as we're doing sort of this wholesale implementation, which is a useful segue. So we had a quick and dirty policy subcommittee meeting on Friday. The purpose of this was at the request of Sam Sanders to take a very broad look at the implementation of the Affordable Housing Plan. By way of background, this is a follow-on to our prior meeting where we discussed the developing an implementation plan. And as the first step of that, or a preamble to that, he has asked for a rough cut from us on priorities based on the following buckets. Bucket number 1 is looking at the Affordable Housing Plan and the recommendations. What can we actually start on or grab a hold of this calendar year? What pieces of that are in the realm of the possible and are of a high enough priority to demand what are now very limited resources to deal with right now? Bucket number 2 are things a little longer term, say by the end of the fiscal year next summer. And bucket number 3 are the things after that. And the things in making these recommendations are not just not just urgency, but also practicality, knowing what we know. The idea behind this is that once we have a rough set, then to coordinate with staff to pare it down based on sort of the internal view of what's doable with the resources available. So what we're looking for now is to compile that list. Dan made a start of that on Friday, but what we'd ask of the entire hack is to look at the implementation timeline at the beginning of the Affordable Housing Plan, look at the guts of those, and then sort of put down a 3-bucket list. It doesn't have to be everything that's there. It's like, well, these are 2 or 3 things I know we can do immediately, or I would hope we can, and so that we can make a presentation there. And that's sort of the homework for folks, and I'll follow up with an email on that. Again, if you could do that in the next week. Again, looking towards a second policy subcommittee meeting where, having downloaded that stuff to Dan, we can sort of put together a basic set of recommendations so that the city can sort of start pointing themselves in the right direction. Does that make sense?
When is the policy committee scheduled?
Well, we're going to schedule it with more free time, more freeboard than we did the last one, which we got stomped by the holiday as well, plus trying to connect with folks. I'm thinking roughly 2 weeks out, maybe a little more. So
Works for me,
that's my
Chair.
thought.
2
Yep.
weeks is good enough
Yeah,
for
because
me.
we have 2 high priority issues to talk about. So it's good to allow for enough time. I know that people are concerned in making sure that we get it in, but we want to be diligent about what we do and what we present because we are making a recommendation.
Right. So the idea for the deadline for this, let's say, would be get this done by next Friday, and I'll be a little bit of a nag on getting that to both Dan and Ridge, and I'll write up a sort of a covering memo to go out for clarity purposes, so that we can then meet the following week on it, but we've got some time to do it. I mean, that's a little compressed, but it's, at least that gives us some broad. And then we're in October. Oh my God, we're in October.
My only concern is as long as we have ample amount of time to review the documents and to consider and provide proper feedback.
Yes, ma'am. So that's what we'll do. That's what part 2 of the subcommittee report was there. And that's that. I'd like to take a moment here to see if we've got, if there's any public comment on either of these matters, and then we'll move on to see if we've got other business. But if you could raise your hand if you're amongst the public, if there are any, or otherwise poke. Nancy, I see you. Just give me a second. There you are. Nancy Carpenter.
Thank you very much for the few minutes here to address the hack. I am really enthused about this tax abatement plan. It really seems like it's got some good teeth and really could be a program that could help those who most certainly need it. But my real interest was hearing the conversation around a homeless hub, because it's something that I'm very passionate about. I think some of you heard me speak at another table a couple of weeks ago. And, you know, I don't want to see it just become another door that somebody goes through, that it actually becomes a door to different types of housing services, whether that's navigation, because we don't teach our young people how to talk to landlords. We don't ask them, you know, give them courses on what to say and do to be successful when they're looking for housing, as well as the financial aspect of it, because there's like, what, 6 or 7, maybe more different types of programs that provide financial assistance. And to create just another door, I think, you know, can be very frustrating, you know, for a lot of people. So I'm really looking forward to how this moves along. And also, you know, is it, you know, do you really want to limit it to like city residents? Because when I look at communities that have a successful housing hub, they are, you know, doing it all. And I think there are some people here on this table that have talked about a one-stop shop, and you know, they have all those components in there. And sometimes it may mean that certain agencies that have been doing something for years may have to consider, you know, how that then plays into a housing hub. So thank you for letting me, you know, address the hack. And I look forward to hearing, you know, more about all these issues as you know, proceed on. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public? Okay, I'm not seeing any unless I'm. All right. I guess that brings us to other business. Is there anything else we need to attend to at this moment? I'm not hearing a clamoring for more chat. All right, so I will get a covering memo out via the listserv regarding the 2 remits and the timetables, some stuff to Ridge, some stuff to Dan. We will look to schedule a policy subcommittee in quote 2 weeks, well ahead of the next hack meeting and well after this one, which I guess is 2 weeks. Anything else that I need to address in that memo?
Just to please request to schedule that ASAP. My
Yep.
schedule these days is hard to manage.
Yeah.
Try to avoid Fridays.
Oh, amen. Okay. I will entertain any motion or discussion at this time.
I move that we adjourn the hack meeting.
Second.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Do I hear a second?
Chris, your mic is low. Chris seconded.
Seconded it.
Oh, did it? Okay, yes. Nancy Carpenter, please connect with Chris because whatever microphone you're using, he needs. All right. Any discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thanks,
Any
everybody.
opposed? You're adjourned.
Good night.
Thank you. Take care.